Church, we have a problem. Evangelism is dead or nearly dead in most congregations, and we're going to discuss what's going on, what you can do about it, and how to bring evangelism back into the rhythms of your church. So, Dad, I know you've just written a book on this. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Very excited about sharing the gospel with ease.
Thank you. I'm excited about it too, because that book has become a conduit where I'm sharing the gospel with ease. I'll tell you more.
Yeah, but we certainly want to introduce our sponsor, who there's plenty of evangelism research, resources, and study that you can find at Logos Faith Life. And according to a recent survey, 30% of evangelical churchgoers want more in-depth teaching. So if you want to go deeper into the word, Logos is the Bible study platform for you. Logos fuses powerful technology with biblical resources so you can access Bibles, search tools, commentaries, seminary level courses, even audiobooks right there on your phone, tablet, or desktop, including resources on evangelism, which is what we're talking about today. They've got 200,000 digital books from the world's top publishers, and now Logos is more affordable than ever. So get started for just $49. Go to logos.com/churchanswers. That's logos.com/churchanswers, and go check out what they have to offer. All right. Why is evangelism dead, and what are we going to do, Dad?
Well, let's talk about, is evangelism dead in churches? Recently, we did it was more of an overview than a poll, but we looked at churches, and basically we were looking at churches that we asked the question, or do you have an ongoing evangelism emphasis? And the response was fewer than 1% of churches have an ongoing evangelism emphasis. So we know that evangelism is not a high priority. Guess what churches have? They have an ongoing worship emphasis. They have an ongoing fellowship emphasis. They usually have an ongoing discipleship emphasis and an ongoing ministry
emphasis. Take up the offering every week.
They have an ongoing giving emphasis. They do not have an ongoing evangelism emphasis. I am encouraged. I am hearing more and more people talk about evangelism. Not too long ago, I was talking to our folks at Brown Church Development Group. In case you've never heard of them, they're the people that we partner with on church construction, new church work, renovation. We love them, and that's what they do. But I was talking to the leadership around Church Development Group, and they said, we're not as concerned about buildings as we are making certain that what we do gets the word of the gospel out. We're just one of the tools of it. And when I hear design build companies talk about that, when I hear architects and church constructors talk about that, I am encouraged. There is reason to be not encouraged, and that is because it's not this ongoing emphasis in local churches. And yeah, thank you for mentioning that book, Sharing the Gospel with Ease. It's a book that I ended up writing, and at the time I was thinking, is this really my genre? Because I write more about practical church matters, and the more I got to thinking about it is, if this isn't a part of the practice of the church, we are totally missing it. And so I wrote the book. I just used the book in my community group, and as a result of just going through the book and looking at the accompanying scripture, I believe our community group has become an evangelistic mission force for our church and for the community. And so I am incredibly excited. But here's what we got to look at. Conversion growth is woefully lacking in most churches. I have my theories. I bet you do too, Sam. Why that happened?
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned this before, but evangelism used to be a program. Now, some of those programs did not work well. Some did. Some were good. Some, I won't say they were bad. They just were inefficient.
Not as effective as they should be.
A lot of energy poured into not as much fruit as you would have hoped for. Let's just put it that way. So I won't say any evangelism is good. So we just kind of abandoned them because there were a lot of work. People weren't showing up, Monday night, Tuesday night, visitation or outreach or whatever you used to call it. And you get your handful, you go out, do your thing, and people just kind of felt like it wasn't going anywhere. So we stopped. Well, we should have replaced the programs. We should have figured out how to do it better. And we didn't. We just kind of rode the wave of cultural Christianity for the last, 40 years with this baby boomer generation, which they've, done a lot of good, but
no, we've messed up.
You've messed up a whole lot too, but you've done a lot of good. Mm-hmm. But guess what? The younger generations didn't just naturally come into church. It wasn't part of the culture. So, if you've got a group naturally coming into church, they're going to hear the gospel, hopefully hear the gospel in their church, but that stopped. So churches stopped growing. They stopped doing outreach, and it has become a vicious cycle because we are no longer doing the work of evangelism, which is the Great Commission. We've forgotten the most basic thing of the church, the Acts 1 and imperative, the Great Commission. We're supposed to be sharing our faith, and we're not equipping people to do it.
I saw a tweet today that cited me and a blog post I wrote a long time ago that was called "If I Were Satan." I'm not going to write that now because I would get so much affirmation that maybe you are. But one of the things I said, and this person cited me, if I were Satan, I would make certain that all activities looked more important than evangelism in my church.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's not good, but it's good. Like, it hits a nerve. Let me say that.
Yep. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, the second point is one we need to bring up. A culture shift is needed to reignite the church and evangelism. What we did with those programs, for the most part, and I don't want to just give a blanket condemnation, but for the most part, we educated people in evangelism. We did not inspire the hearts toward evangelism. And what is needed now is a culture shift where we're still talking about sharing the gospel, whether you use 3 circles or some other gospel presentation methodology. We're still talking about that. But if you want something to be sustained in your church, you have to make certain that there is something taking place in evangelism on an ongoing basis, at least once a quarter, if not more frequently, if ongoing. One of the things that we'll be introducing shortly is called the Hope Initiative. And we use that book, Sharing the Gospel with Ease, as well as another resource coming out. And we take church members, it only takes a few, through 30 days of commitments. And at the end of those 30 days, they have changed, your church has changed, and then we give reminders every week so they don't lose their heart for what they were doing. Every time we've tried this in beta, almost every time, there have been a couple of exceptions, we have seen great success, and I'm talking about great fruit, where churches and church members say, I can do this. It's not a burden, it's a joy. Why? We spend the first 7 days with them on their own doing 20 minutes of prayer every day, the first 7 days, about changing their heart and praying for others and praying for the lost in the community. That's it. That is it. 20 minutes.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the Hope Initiative and all that will happen around that resource. But you can get your book now, Sharing the Gospel with Ease.
And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing in my community, what we did in my community group, and that's what others are doing. That book, this is boastful, but I'll go in and say it. I've had numbers of people share with me after they completed the book that it has changed their heart, and they have handed it to somebody usually, and it's changed the heart of that person. Let me give you an example. Janice, if you're listening, Janice is in my community group. She's married to Steve. Steve is an introvert worse than I am, and therefore we
That's not possible.
Adore you. It is possible. Steve and I don't talk to each other a lot. That's why we like each other. Janice gave a copy of Evangelism, or Sharing the Gospel with Ease, to her mother, her elderly mother, who went on a cruise and became bold on the cruise as a result of reading that. That is, Janice.
Well, they're stuck on a ship with her. She's going around sharing the gospel. I love it.
Except Jesus will go overboard, something like that. But the issue is a heart issue, and we talk about working with the heart first. But it's not merely, oh, I'm going to have a better attitude. It's then the action that follows as a result of the attitude. But this third point is critical. It's critical in anything. But if evangelism is going to be a priority in the church, the pastor has to demonstrate that it's a priority in his life. You do that, Sam, and I know that you do that with your staff.
We do. We have a weekly staff meeting with our ministry team, and the very first thing on the standing agenda is what we call gospel conversations. So we share every week about a gospel conversation that we have had with someone. And most of the time, a segment of the staff has something to say, which is good. You feel a little guilty if you go 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks and you haven't shared. So we celebrate. It's not meant to be something that is that causes a guilt trip or anything like that. It's not meant to be overbearing, but it is a way that we hold each other accountable. You will do what is important to you, and you will prioritize the most important things in your life. That's just the bottom line. You can say evangelism is important. You can say sharing your faith is good and that you should be doing it, but it's another thing to do it. And so you will do the things that are important to you. So we've just made it a point to do the thing, evangelism, that is most important. And we talk about these gospel conversations. Now, it's fun. It's lighthearted. It's, hey, I got to meet this person and we talked, and here's how I shared Jesus, or here's how they responded to my invite to church. You get all sorts of crazy stories. Some people are responsive. Some people are not. Every now and then somebody will be antagonistic. Honestly, it's pretty rare that you find people who are antagonistic.
It is rare.
So it ends up being good conversations, joyful conversations. We've made it a priority. We're trying to lead by example. Now we can challenge the church to follow our example because we're doing it.
We have made it a priority at Church Answers. Now, how have we made it a priority? Well, I don't call on the staff during our weekly meeting to talk about their gospel conversations. Don't do that. But what we are doing is we're making certain that evangelism is at the forefront of what we're talking to churches and how we're moving churches forward and what we're doing. For example, the book, Sharing the Gospel with Ease, published by Tyndale because we wanted to get this information out as a priority. The book put into our curriculum in our new university, our certification university, our diploma university, Church Answers University, foundational course. So we, as pastors and other church leaders trained through Church Answers University, they are going to see that evangelism, personal evangelism for your church members, is something that is highly important. And so we are putting evangelism at the forefront. You can check the show notes out for Church Answers University, though. We're having an incredible response there.
Yeah, there's an evangelism course in Church Answers University.
Yes, and uses the book that we're talking about. So, yeah. So we are trying to lead by example and priority. And as you and I have both alluded, we will be launching the Hope Initiative very soon. And I think it is going to be groundbreaking for many churches because it's a year-round emphasis that is not a burden to the pastor and not a burden to the church members as well. And it surely gets the gospel out there. Common question that we're often asked: how do I revitalize my church? Well, I always tell them to go to the Church Revitalization Checklist, first of all, written by Sam Rainer. But I also will say, in addition to that, make certain that your revitalization has evangelism at its priority, because a church cannot find new life, which is what revitalization means, to live again, unless it is introducing the new life to people through the gospel. So if you want to see your church turn around, move evangelism to the forefront. And here's the key. Our community group averages 12 people. I may be off one or two, but we average about 12 people. And in our community group, those 12 all said that their evangelistic hearts had changed. We're in a church that averages 170-ish, is my guess. And we have a dozen people now that have an evangelistic heart and have had heart changes. Think about the impact of that. Fewer than 10% of the average attendance, but it could be monumental. My point in all of this is you don't have to worry that 90% of your people are going to commit to something. A few people who become gospel bearers and fired up with the gospel can change a church. I bet you've known a few people in the 17 or 18 churches where you've served as pastor. I bet that you have known a few people who have had evangelistic hearts that have been instrumental in the health of the church as well.
Yeah, because the Holy Spirit is with us, we will always have that handful in the church that are passionate about evangelism, whether or not the church trains people for evangelism or not. You're going to have some, simply because the Spirit is moving. That being said, you would have a whole lot more if we trained and equipped people intentionally. So, of course, I've pastored churches where, we've had stories. I've got so many stories, and we just don't have time to tell all of them. But I think of Randall, my friend Randall, who always bringing in somebody new to the church. I don't know if I've shared this story or not on this particular podcast. I talk a lot, so I forget who I tell what. But did I tell you the time about Randall bringing the Indians, the people from India, to church? Okay, you're giving.
I don't know, but my problem is I listen to you half the time, so I may have been.
That's true. That's not a joke. That's true. So this is a former church, and I'm in the foyer area, and there's several Indians, like people from India, and they obviously don't speak English, and they're clearly out of place. Let's just put it that. We're glad they're there. No one is upset that they're there. So I start asking around, like, what are they doing here? I'm glad they're here, but how'd they get here? And people kind of, well, I think Randall brought them. So Randall he drove the church bus. He had a CDL. And he decided this Sunday morning to go to the bus stop, the actual bus stop in town, and pick people up. Well, they didn't know a lot of English. So they just assumed that they were going to take the bus to the mall. But instead, they got on the bus and they went to church. I think one or two of them stuck. Randall was always sharing his faith. Randall, and I had to tell Randall, listen, you can't
kidnap people.
Yeah, I mean, you can't trick people into getting on the church bus.
That is hilarious.
So,
but it makes Randall even more.
Oh man, it was great. Here's my point: you're always going to have a Randall in a church. Like, you're going to have some of those who are out there that it doesn't matter if they're trained or not; they're just going to do it because the Spirit's in them. But we really need a movement. And the only way you're going to get a movement in a church, the only way we're going to see churches turn around and revitalized, is to get a handful of people, train them and equip them. Get 2, get 6, get 10, get whoever you can and train them up. Let's just think about this. What if you're like, well, I only know of 3 or 4 or 5 people that maybe would be interested in this? Great. What if they are successful? What if it's 5 people and they're successful twice a year? Well, that's 10 new, probably families, not just individuals. That's 10 new families that are joining your church or assimilating into your church if your best are only successful twice a year. So this can absolutely turn around a church.
Well, it's a key to revitalization. It's a key to the health of the church. And pastors may be asking the question, and the lay people who are listening as well, where's a good beginning point? Well, it could be just handpicking the group that you mentioned, or it could be there's a small group in the church and you know someone that is really committed to evangelism or would be committed to evangelism, and you ask him or her, would you be willing to lead a group? Say, you use my book, Sharing the Gospel with Ease, using some type of evangelism resource, and see what happens on the other side. The point in all of this is it only takes a few to make a huge difference. You don't have to worry about having, if you're having in a church of 150, you don't have to worry about having 100 people committed to it. You would love it, but you don't need to be discouraged if you don't have it. But begin somewhere. So let's review these. Conversion growth is lacking. The culture has changed overall, but the culture needs to change in the church. You cannot have people who are mentally ready to share the gospel until their hearts have been readied as well. The pastor, you pastors who are listening, your example is vital. Church turnarounds, you want to see church turnaround? Do evangelism. See what you can do with evangelism. And did I mention get Sam's book, Church Revitalization Checklist? Because that will help a whole lot too. And then one of the possible places to begin is small groups. So in the context of this, we have given you several ideas, several examples. It's not so important which one you do. It's important that you do something, particularly something to change the culture of the church. I believe as we begin to see the culture shift in churches where the gospel, sharing our faith becomes more important, that's when we'll start seeing revitalization take place. Speaking of people who have had an impact spiritually in my life, and though I've met him a couple of times, Tony Dungy. Do you know the time when he came to my office when I was president of another company? I tell you about that, Sam?
If you have, I've forgotten.
Right. Okay, well, that's usually the 50-50 thing. You listen to 50% of what I say too. He came to my office, and our company really wanted to publish his book, really wanted. And so we tried very, very hard. And basically, I know Tony Dungy well enough to know that he is going to make a decision not as much based upon the finances as he is where he thinks God is leading him. So we met with him. He was humble. We gave our pitch, if you will, about why we think you should publish with us. We lost it. We didn't get it. You know who ended up publishing that book?
No.
Tyndale.
No. Well, they're the best.
I had no idea at the time. I actually had no idea. Tony and his wife, Lauren Dungy, have a new book out called An Uncommon Influence. And what Lauren and Tony are doing is here's 11 ways to turn your ordinary life into an extraordinary life that can be used to influence others toward God. They believe everybody can do this and that everybody of any age has something to give. Young or old, many resources, few resources, everyone can do something to make a difference. Everybody wants to make a difference in this life. Everybody wants to be different. The Dungies are that type of example. Uncommon Influence was published in partnership with Tyndale and Compassion International. You can get it now almost anywhere, but we'll have a link to the different places you can, but including the Church Answer store, or you can visit everyoneneedscompassion.com to learn more. Once again, thank you for being with us on Rainer on Leadership that has now become, over the months and years, Rainer's on Leadership. Come back to our episode next week. We're going to be talking about something I think you'll find very fascinating. We'll see you next week.